Good afternoon. I'm Naima Almström, legal advisor at Lantmäteriet. And Lantmäteriet is the Swedish mapping, cadastral and land registration authority. We have created a model for data and service sharing with EU that I would like to try to describe to you at least. But first, a little background. Where should I? This? It didn't work, but
it should work.
Yeah. So, in Sweden, as in many other countries, there are several public authorities that are responsible for different parts of information, of spatial information. And to speak of this in metaphors, you can see it as different, separate wells of information. And it's a hard work to go from well to well to collect information. It should be much better if you had an information tap, just turn it on when you needed the information and turn it off when you don't need it anymore. We are not there yet in Sweden, but we are working on it. And one way to get there is to cooperate, of course. And so we have a business model and an infrastructure for our own spatial information. The public authorities who have their information wells have signed an agreement on cooperation, which regulates responsibilities between agencies being responsible for their information, being responsible for provision of spatial data according to INSPIRE. And the agreement includes descriptions of backgrounds and goals, organization, management, coordination, partners' commitments and responsibilities, and the financing of the infrastructure. And this agreement has been in place for 1.5 years now. And now when this is done, it's time to go further to reach the purpose of INSPIRE, and that is to establish an infrastructure for spatial information in the European community for the purposes of community environmental policies and policies or activities which may have an impact on the environment. As I mentioned, there are several public authorities in Sweden responsible for the different parts of spatial information. And when so many different parties hold spatial data of interest for INSPIRE, someone has to coordinate it. And in Sweden, in the Spatial Information Ordinance, Lantmäteriet has been pointed out to be that coordinator. And Lantmäteriet is also pointed out to be the contact point for the European Commission in these questions. According to the Swedish Spatial Information Ordinance, Lantmäteriet can also enter into a data and service sharing agreement in questions regarding another Swedish public authority and their data sharing with the EU or with another member state. But that can only be done if Lantmäteriet and the public authority agree to it in some way. So, therefore, we have created a model for data and service sharing agreement with the EU. And it's data sharing between, on one hand, a Swedish public authority with information responsibility, and on the other hand, organs of EU or public authorities in other member states. In that model, Lantmäteriet is to be the first contact point when it comes a request from EU or another member state, and the Swedish model is built on the idea of a power of attorney. When signing the letter of authority, the Swedish public authority gives Lantmäteriet the power to sign a data and service sharing agreement regarding that public authority's supplying of spatial information. And that is to fulfill its information responsibility according to the Swedish Spatial Information Act and the Ordinance. I will show you a picture of this model. It starts with a letter of authority between Lantmäteriet and a public authority with information responsibility, saying that Lantmäteriet is obliged to contract with EU or another member state on behalf of that authority. And when it comes an order from EU, it should go directly to Lantmäteriet, who takes care of it. If it goes to the public authority directly, then the authority should pass it on up to Lantmäteriet. Then Lantmäteriet has a checklist of what information is needed for the agreement that it sends to the public authority, who puts together conditions, fees, prices, rules of payment, and whatever will be needed, and send it back to Lantmäteriet. And then Lantmäteriet drafts the agreement, supplemented with the conditions specified by the public authority. And then it comes to the signing of the agreement, and then that is when the power of attorney is needed, signing between EU or another member state and Lantmäteriet. Then Lantmäteriet gives a signal to the public authority to supply and to charge if the agreement says so. The main purpose with this model is to facilitate for the public authorities in Sweden, but it should also facilitate for the organs of EU and for public authorities in other member states, because it's always easier to have one contact point for all Swedish spatial information, of course, than it is to contact each public authority for the information you will need. And remember the picture with the different wells and the one with one information tap. Back to sorry. Now, maybe this. Yeah, this is a power of attorney. It says that the public authority gives Lantmäteriet the power of attorney to sign a data and service sharing agreement regarding the public authorities' supplying of spatial information to EU or to another member state to fulfill its information responsibility. And according to the power of attorney, the Lantmäteriet has some responsibilities. It's responsible for drawing up a model for data and service sharing agreement. As I showed in the picture, Lantmäteriet is also responsible to draw up an agreement for signing when it's time for that, and draw up a checklist regarding what information the public authority have to provide to Lantmäteriet. Lantmäteriet then contacts the public authority to get access to information in connection with an order from EU or from a member state. And when it's time, Lantmäteriet informs the authority so delivery can be done. The public authority, which has given Lantmäteriet the power of attorney, is responsible for, when Lantmäteriet asks for it, to provide necessary documents and information to Lantmäteriet as soon as possible, so that Lantmäteriet can draft the agreement. And it's also responsible for the supply and delivery of data, and that invoicing is carried out according to signed agreement. And if the public authority gives Lantmäteriet incomplete information, which makes the signing of the data and service sharing agreement impossible, then Lantmäteriet will hand it over to the public authority itself to handle. Lantmäteriet has also drawn up licenses for data and service sharing. In that work, we have been following the Commission's guidance document for data and service sharing. And it contains recommendations for cross-border data and service sharing, for example, what a framework agreement can look like, and an example of licenses and conditions, and so on. And as you can see, from this recommendation, Lantmäteriet has drawn up 2 standard licenses a basic license and a specific license. And the basic license is free of charge. The specific license is to be used when there is a fee for the information requested. This model with the power of attorney is recently released, but already a few public authorities have showed their interest, and one has already signed this letter of authority. But we are hoping that more Swedish public authorities will sign this in the near future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for an interesting presentation. It's again short. I don't know what is going on here. I think in the these guidelines for authors it was supposed to be 20 minutes, but anyway. Okay, but we have a lot of time for questions, of course. So, my dear audience, the floor is yours. Please. Here is the one. Okay. Can you just wait for a microphone, please? Yeah.
Thank you very much for this presentation. What I wonder is whether we can get the emails or have your presentations via email. It passed very quick, and the other presenters also.
Or I can, yeah. You can, of course, email me if questions comes up later.
I would just like to say I think that all presentations will be available on the website of the conference, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Here we have one.
So I find this model with this power of attorney quite interesting. I never heard that it exists in any other country, but maybe this is just my lack of knowledge that I don't know of this. So if I got it properly, then the idea is that the handling of the requests is centralized in your institutions, and smaller bodies who hold environmental information would not have to bother themselves with the handling of the licensing agreements, but they would just entrust you with handling this issue and talking to the persons requesting this information. Is that a correct understanding?
The speakers are making the noise very strange.
So,
I don't hear that good.
It was a question. It was not good. You couldn't well hear me. Should I repeat it once more? Yeah. So I find the model quite interesting, this with the power of attorney. And I want to double check if I properly understood it, how you presented it. So you are getting powers of attorneys of other public bodies who are holding information. So you, for them, handle the request of data that you receive by other private or bodies or by EU institutions or neighboring countries. So it is an offer to do the handling of these requests.
Yes,
is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. And my question was, are there other countries in Europe who follow this approach, which I find quite practical?
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't know, yeah. In Austria, I'm from Austria, I'm from the Environment Agency in Austria, and we don't have this model so far, but I find it very practical, because if every municipality would have to develop their own somehow license agreements and develop this legal capacity needed to do the handling of these requests, it would be a lot of work. And so you concentrate this knowledge in one institution, and the others profit from your knowledge, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Some other questions, please? Comments? Kathleen. Okay, here is the one, please.
Saulis Urbanas from Eurogeographics. I just wanted to ask, actually, have you allowed other authorities to use access to your data via other public authorities in Sweden? For example, if today we have been working on emergency management system where the European Commission wants to get an access to the Landmaterie data, and because Landmaterie has a valid agreement with the Civil Protection Authority, can Civil Protection Authority grant the right to use your data for Commission?
We have this agreement of cooperation between the information responsible authorities in Sweden, and Lantmäteriet is one of them. So through that cooperation we can share data. This power of attorney is not regulating that part, really.
I have one question. Actually, it's a kind of a comment or question for all the presenters of today's session. I was wondering if there is a way to start thinking, or to maybe there is already some initiative about that, to bring all those processes to some standardized computer-based process that would be handled not by, handling papers and so on. Because if you wish to compare it with something, then it's the mobile phones. You don't have to go to other, you just ring your home from Istanbul, Turkey, and you get your connection, and the machines actually negotiate the terms based on standard, of course, templates.
To my knowledge, there are many ideas and many initiatives, but very few solutions so far. And we've actually been having discussions about it the last few days, and it's also one of the questions we've been trying to tackle a bit in the drafting team on data sharing and service sharing for the Inspire regulation we've made, because we run into the same issues. And from our perspective, we have been wondering why there hasn't been more translation in rights expression language, and why the GORM standards and that sort of thing are not used for this. And to a certain extent, to me, it seems that the kind of people that sitting on this row have not found a way to communicate it to the people who work on the services or the people who work with the technical parts of it, and vice versa. And while we've been saying it for years that we should, somehow we haven't got there yet. But I think that what we can take away from this conference this year is that the sense of urgency is getting a lot bigger. So I'm hoping that the ideas and initiatives will actually turn into something practical anytime soon.
Mariana, Naima, do you want to add something to this? Or? Okay. Good. Some more. Actually, Katna, you have a question?
A question and a remark. Oh, sorry. We go for the gentleman first. No?
Go ahead, please.
My first remark was that with regard to your question, if it exists in other countries, in the Flemish region in Belgium, we have a similar system. And we even have a system where it's not negotiating anymore. It's even that the data are collected at a central point, the central agency, and they disseminate for the public authorities under a set of fairly standardized conditions. And my question is actually linked to that. Was it a conscious choice to, if I get it correctly from the ideas, Lantmäteriet has the power of attorney to sign, but it's still, during the process, after the request for data, goes to the public authority to ask for conditions or information. Was it a conscious choice to do that rather than have a standard agreement beforehand, so you could have, if you have a power of attorney from the public authority, that you can negotiate for them without having to go back to them in the process, so that they already gave you full power beforehand? Or was that not thought about?
I think that should be a lot of work for Lantmäteriet if we have to coordinate all the information. Also, it's easier to give the request back and collect the information. So that's why, yes.
Pardon me. I'm a little confused. Actually, I'm very confused because I thought that there is a clear distinction between public information and private information, and I don't understand why there is a limitation in the use of public information. So you were talking about the sharing with other member states and other authorities, but there's also people who might want to use this data. So my question is, how is the data within Sweden, how is it licensed to the public people, to people who just want to use this? And then I have a next question.
This model is only for public authorities. Then, of course, ordinary people can turn directly to an authority. But this model with the power of attorney is not. It's only for public authorities.
A second question, or it's not a question, it's more a comment. There was this word of non-commercial use, and that is a term that is not clearly defined. So non-commercial use for public data is something that doesn't go into my mind at all. It just doesn't fit. So maybe you can talk about this a little more. What is your understanding? And another thing that intrigues me, that within Sweden there can be different license conditions for different data because it's different authorities. Is it really so federal and so different that each authority can do what it likes about their data? I can't believe this. There should be some kind of a government level that actually decides what is the license, and that it propagates through the different levels of hierarchy. So this seems to be very spotty and very fragile to me currently.
We have regulations, of course, with limitation for what information we can give out and for what purposes. This was just a short overview of this model, and there's a lot of more laws and regulations on a lower level. I didn't really understand your question. Did you understand?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we have for the public authorities who signed this agreement of coordination, we have the same conditions for use for the data. It's not, well, it's not up to every authority to decide whatever they want or like, because we have these laws that tells us what we can do and shouldn't.
Yeah, I apologize for my question. I'm confused, so my question is also confused. Maybe the other one, the non-commercial, I was more directing it at you. Maybe you have something to add there?
I have spent years and years and pages talking about this issue, so yes. First, with regard to your distinction between public and private data, it's difficult to say because the word public means different things in different contexts. If you talk about public data, it can be about what is the public sector data. It can be about public data as in that it's publicly known or publicly available. I've even heard it used in the terms of public domain, which means that there's no copyright on it. So there's many different ways on how to interpret public data, and that's probably part of where the confusion between public and private comes from. As to your idea about non-commercial use and how that is confusing, I fully agree. I have the feeling, or always had the feeling, that we should stay away from the words commercial and non-commercial and not use them because they are difficult to define, or they can be defined in a particular setting for a particular organization. And they all, or many of them, define it differently. It depends on your national legislation, how you see commercial acts and commercial legislation. And it depends on just a general feeling. If, for instance, for some, internal use by a commercial company is commercial use. For others, it isn't. It's internal use. So it becomes difficult using those terms. But it seems contradictory if you talk about a public authority only using it for non-commercial use. But in a number of countries, it isn't. Because those public bodies actually do provide commercial products based on the data. which then would mean that they have to fall under different conditions than what can be done under the data sharing agreements. So that's why it's important to have it there, even though it seems kind of redundant. But as a general idea, stay away from the commercial, non-commercial distinction.
Good. I think we should move on.